Hey, it's Emily, and I need to tell you about the moment I realized my bank account was being controlled by a woman who died before I was born. I was 24, finally making decent money for the first time in my life. But every time I looked at my savings account, I felt this crushing anxiety, this voice screaming that it wasn't enough, that disaster was coming, that I needed to hoard every penny or I'd end up on the streets. The terrifying part? That voice wasn't mine. It was my grandmother's, and her mother's before her, and generations of women who'd survived poverty by never, ever spending money on themselves. I was living in 2024, but my relationship with money was stuck in 1930. This is the story of how I discovered that ancestral trauma doesn't just live in your DNA, it lives in your wallet, and how breaking that cycle changed everything. I grew up in a house where money was the silent monster under the bed. We never talked about it directly, but it controlled everything. My mom clipped coupons obsessively. Not because we were poor, my dad made a decent salary, but because her mother had taught her that wasting money was a sin, a moral failing. I remember being 8 years old, asking my mom for a new backpack because mine had a broken zipper. She looked at me like I'd asked for a diamond necklace. There's nothing wrong with that backpack. We can fix the zipper. Do you know how many children don't have any backpack at all? I wore the broken backpack for 2 more years. My grandmother, my mom's mom, lived through the Great Depression. She'd tell stories about eating flour soup for dinner, about her father losing everything in a bank collapse, about neighbors who hanged themselves when they lost their farms. These stories were passed down like sacred texts. Never trust banks. Always keep cash hidden. Money disappears when you least expect it. The minute you get comfortable, the rug gets pulled out. She died when I was 12, but her lessons lived on in my mother. And then in me. I got my first job at 16 retail at the mall. I was so proud of that first paycheck. $237 for 2 weeks of work. My mom sat me down that night. Put at least half of everything you earn into savings. You never know when you'll need it. So, I did. I saved half. Then I felt guilty spending the other half on anything fun, so I saved that too. By 18, I had $4,000 saved, and I'd never bought myself a single thing I actually wanted. College was the same. I worked 2 jobs, took out minimal loans, and lived on instant ramen while my roommates went out to restaurants and movies. They called me responsible, mature, smart with money. But inside, I felt like I was suffocating. Like I was living someone else's life, following rules that didn't make sense for my reality. Because here's the thing, I wasn't saving for anything. I wasn't working toward a goal. I was just hoarding. Because the thought of spending money made me feel sick with anxiety. The anxiety that came from nowhere, or so I thought. Fast forward to 24, I landed a great job at a tech startup. $75,000 a year. More money than anyone in my family had ever made. I should have been thrilled. Instead, I was terrified. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the company to go under, for them to realize I wasn't actually qualified and fire me, for the economy to collapse and leave me destitute. So, I saved everything, lived in a tiny studio apartment that cost way less than I could afford, bought clothes from thrift stores, ate meal-prepped chicken and rice every single day. My coworkers would invite me to happy hours, team dinners, weekend trips. I always said no. Because spending money on frivolous things felt dangerous, wrong, like I was tempting fate. After 6 months, I had $30,000 in my savings account, and I was miserable. I was exhausted from constantly denying myself, lonely because I'd isolated myself to save money, anxious because the number in my bank account never felt like enough. No matter how much I saved, the fear didn't go away. Then, something happened that broke me open. My company offered to send me to a conference in Austin, all expenses paid, plus a $1,500 professional development stipend to spend on courses, books, or coaching. I immediately felt that familiar dread. What if they're testing me? What if spending the stipend makes me look irresponsible? I asked my manager. She looked confused. Emily, it's your money to invest in your growth. That's the whole point. But I couldn't do it. The idea of spending $1,500 even on my career made me feel physically ill. That's when I realized something was deeply wrong. I made an appointment with a therapist who specialized in financial anxiety. I expected her to give me budgeting advice. Instead, she asked about my family. Tell me about your parents' relationship with money. I described the coupon clipping, the guilt around spending, the constant fear of loss. And your grandparents? I told her about my grandmother, the depression, the flour soup stories. She leaned forward. Emily, what you're experiencing isn't financial anxiety. It's inherited trauma. Your grandmother's survival responses are still living in your nervous system. I must have looked confused because she continued. Your grandmother lived in an economy where hoarding resources meant survival, where one bad decision could mean starvation. Her brain developed neural pathways that associated spending with danger and saving with safety. Those patterns got passed to your mother, and then to you. But I didn't live through the depression, I said. I grew up middle class. Why would I have her trauma? Because trauma can be inherited, not just through behavior and stories, but actually through your biology. It's called epigenetic inheritance. Your grandmother's fear shaped how your mother raised you, and now it's shaping how you live. That session changed everything. I started seeing the pattern everywhere. The guilt I felt about making more than my parents, that was the guilt of excess. The feeling that succeeding beyond them meant betraying their struggle. The constant waiting for disaster, that was the other shoe mentality. My grandmother had watched everything collapse once, so she spent the rest of her life waiting for it to happen again. And she taught us to wait too. The inability to spend money on myself, that was the survival instinct. In times of genuine scarcity, self-sacrifice keeps the family alive. But I wasn't in scarcity. I was in abundance. And I couldn't see it because I was looking at the world through my grandmother's eyes. My therapist gave me an assignment. I want you to spend money this week on something that's purely for enjoyment. Not practical, not necessary, just something that makes you happy. I agonized over it for days. Finally, I bought a houseplant, a beautiful monstera in a ceramic pot. $47? I felt nauseous carrying it home, guilty setting it on my windowsill, like I'd done something shameful. But then something unexpected happened. Every time I looked at that plant, I felt proud. I'd chosen something just because I wanted it. I'd spent money on beauty, not just survival. It sounds ridiculous. A houseplant changing my life. But that plant was proof. Proof that spending money didn't lead to disaster. That I could invest in my present, not just hoard for an apocalypse that might never come. I started small. Joined my coworkers for one dinner a month. Bought a new pair of jeans that actually fit instead of wearing ones 2 sizes too big from the thrift store. Spent the professional development stipend on a course I'd been wanting to take. Each time I felt the old fear. The voice saying, "You'll regret this. You're being irresponsible. You're not your grandmother. You don't know how to survive." But each time, nothing bad happened. The world didn't collapse. I didn't end up homeless. I just enjoyed my life a little more. My therapist taught me to reframe the narrative. Instead of spending money is dangerous, I practiced investing in my growth is strategic. Instead of I need to save everything, I learned I need to save enough and live now. The difference was subtle but profound. Saving enough versus saving everything. Strategic expansion versus survival mode. I started researching my family's financial history, talked to my mom about my grandmother's experiences. Learned that my great-grandmother had lost a farm in the Depression. That trauma rippled forward for 90 years. But it didn't have to ripple forward anymore. I could be the generation that broke the cycle. It's been 18 months since that first therapy session. My relationship with money is completely different now. I still save, but I save with purpose. For retirement, for emergencies, for goals. Not out of fear, but out of intention. I spend without guilt, on experiences with friends, on my apartment that I actually like living in, on professional development that moves my career forward. I invested $10,000 in learning new skills. That investment led to a promotion and a $30,000 raise. My grandmother's scarcity mindset would have called that reckless, but from an abundance mindset, that was the smartest financial decision I've ever made. I had a hard conversation with my mom, told her about the inherited trauma, about how her money anxiety had shaped mine. She cried, "I was trying to protect you, to teach you what my mother taught me." "I know," I said, and in her time, those lessons saved lives. But we're not in her time anymore. The rules that kept her alive are keeping us trapped. We started breaking the pattern together. She bought herself the expensive coffee she'd always denied herself. I took her to a nice restaurant for her birthday instead of cooking at home to save money. Small acts of defiance against generations of fear. If you're watching this and you recognize that voice, the one that says you can never have enough, that disaster is always coming, that spending money on yourself is selfish, I need you to hear this. That voice isn't yours. It's inherited. It belonged to someone who lived in a different time, with different realities, different survival needs. Your grandmother's fear kept her alive, but it doesn't have to control your life. You can honor her struggle without living in it forever. You can break the cycle without betraying her memory. Ask yourself, is this fear mine, or did I inherit it? Is this rule protecting me or limiting me? Start small. Spend money on one thing purely for joy, one experience, one investment in yourself. Notice that the world doesn't end. You're not being reckless. You're updating your operating system from survival mode to growth mode. The abundance you're capable of creating, your ancestors couldn't even imagine it. But you can, and you deserve to. That's my journey. That's what I learned, and I'm still learning it every day. Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Emily's Journal at 23 if this resonated. Share how you're breaking your own family patterns in the comments. Remember, you're not just changing your life, you're changing your lineage. I'll see you in the next entry.